Welcome to Unlayered, the show where we explore next generation blockchains. I'm your host, Saul, alongside my co host, Dave. And today we're joined by Jonathan Dockrell. John is the CEO and co founder of SkyTrade. The URL is sky.trade. And John is really experienced in marketplaces, previously led growth of Deliveroo vehicles in the BMW Mercedes rideshare market space, which they took number 2 against Uber in London in 3 months. He also worked for Ryanair as a product manager and has founded and exited several retail and property ventures. And for those who are not familiar, SkyTrade is a platform where you can monetize your airspace. And we're going to dive into all of this throughout the interview. But John, thank you for taking the time today and joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the intro, Sal.
So SkyTrade is one of the most interesting crypto applications I've seen. I didn't really know that you could monetize one's airspace. I didn't know that was a thing. Maybe let's start with that. I mean, how did you decide on this kind of asset class, which it seems to be you're trying to turn it into an asset class that people monetize? How did you discover this? I'm sure it probably has something to do with your background and working for Ryanair, perhaps.
Yeah, so I guess early days, I kind of looked at drones with a couple of other businesses, and we didn't actually do anything, but a little bit of research we were doing around them. And what I discovered was everyone was telling me the problem with drones, and initially this started in the drone space, and it kind of moved into more the real estate space. But originally it was kind of, I was seeing that drones could fly. The technology was there for drones to fly. In fact, it'd been there for quite some time. And the kind of question popped into my head, like, where are the drones? Like, literally, where are they? What's going on? And I started digging a little bit, and people kept telling me, oh, it's regulation. Regulation's the problem. And then digging a little bit further, I realized, yeah, regulation is a factor, sure. But there's this element of legality involving low altitude airspace that really appears to be one of the big blockers. And when I dug around, it turns out, and kind of, I knew in my head this was the case, but I hadn't kind of fully grasped it. But in certain jurisdictions, the air rights up to a certain height are owned by the property owner. Now, this is particularly true in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, a few other countries, but mainly common law jurisdictions. So in common law, you own, originally it was like from heaven to hell. The government overreached that and took some of that back. But in the US, for example, it's up to 500 feet above the highest point. UK is similar. And that means, if you think about it, that every airspace or every piece of low altitude airspace is owned by someone or some entity. So it seemed to me kind of, as you mentioned, my background in marketplace, it seemed to me like this was kind of built for a marketplace. There needed to be some sort of coordination to enable this space to be, if you like, given or rented or permission or consent for the drones to be in that airspace. So that's kind of the premise of where we started. And as we kind of developed that on, it kind of quickly moved into more of the real estate space as well, because there is a kind of relatively opaque but active market in trading air rights in real estate. So yeah, that's kind of where I came about. And then on digging around and research, I kind of came across a think tank called the Mercatus Center in the US. And they'd written on air rights and the potential of air rights as a marketplace, kind of through the lens of spectrum sales was where they had kind of originally started looking. The idea behind spectrum sales is you can sell off a spectrum, highest bidder wins, and they then, rent it out or whatever to other players in the market. And that was the kind of idea they were looking at, these kind of highways in the sky. But that quickly developed for us because while you can use highways, you still need to go A to B. So you still need private airspace. So that's originally kind of where the kind of the crux of the idea came. And the more we looked into it, the more we realized it was hard. And the harder it became, the more interested we became in trying to solve it. Yeah.
So I thought a lot about drones as well, which is super interesting. And I've always wondered, kind of to your point, why haven't they taken off? I think we've always saw a world where residential deliveries could be completed by drones instead of humans. Yet here we are, in 2024, and that's not really taken off, as far as I know, in many jurisdictions. So I guess you're saying a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's restrictions on the airspace where drone operators can fly. And so if we unlock that, then that barrier is reduced. Is that kind of the key point here? I just want to make sure I understand the problem space.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the key point, certainly for the drone industry. So we look at it, we kind of segregate what we do into the drone industry and then more B2B real estate, and we can cover that later. But yeah, from the drone section, yes, that's exactly it. There's kind of two major factors. One, the regulators. So will they regulate drones and allow drones to fly, first of all? So will you, in the US, for example, will the FAA say, yes, I'm a commercial entity, my 100 drones are safe, they're approved, they can fly, you get the licenses. So first one, tick. And the second one is, well, I need airspace to fly in. So just from first principles, you need airspace to fly flying objects in. And if you don't have permission to fly that in airspace, you're snookered. What can you do? You either trespass, which is currently what's happening, or else you get some space that had been given permission to you to be into it. So yeah, that's exactly it. So that's kind of one of the unlocks. I mean, if the regulator wasn't keen on drones and didn't want drones to happen at all, unlocking the space wouldn't matter. But certainly in the US, the FAA are very keen on kind of pushing drones out now. In the UK, there's actually been quite a kind of movement towards it. And drones are flying in the US in certain locations. Again, without permission of the homeowner, but they are doing it. And when we look at other jurisdictions that have done it, like Shenzhen and things, they do like thousands of drone deliveries. They're able to do them. They deliver them to a specific location, sometimes to because they're high rise, so that you can't directly deliver to somebody's door in a high rise. So they have kind of places where you can land them and you can collect them there. But in the US, it's different. So Texas, for example, not very high rise, certainly on the outskirts. So you can land them in people's gardens. You can land them on people's front doorsteps. So that's the unlock we see, certainly for the drone industry. And then the real estate industry, as I said, is a kind of slightly different beast, but we can chat about that later.
But did you say you can go along highways without permission? So theoretically, if you were going around London, you could presumably stick to the main roads, the streets, to navigate to various people's addresses. And therefore, what this does is maybe makes it more efficient, reduces the flying distance.
Yeah, I mean, potentially you can. So in the US, again, the highways above their roads, so certain states are actually leasing their highways or looking to lease the air above their highways so that they can also get a fee for drones traveling and they can permit them to be in that. And also, if you travel along regular roads or highways, it adds about 40% to the cost of a drone rather than going from A to B. So the unit economics start to really erode. So they need the private airspace to do it. Again, what we're seeing is most municipalities in the US are looking to do something with their highways. They're not looking to allow drones just to be free in the air because they see this as a whole ecosystem where they can actually help develop it. So if there is actually money coming into it, they can start to build drone landing stations. They can start to actually develop this. And not just the drones delivering your burger and fries. They're looking kind of longer term on cargo drones, for example, where you can actually take goods along the highways to particular spots. So yeah, I mean, you can go through the highways, adds to your cost, but yeah, for sure, you need to cross both is the thing.
So that covers drones. You're also talking about there are real estate use cases for this airspace. Do you want to just talk us through what they are?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we started to realize early, and maybe I'll step back a little bit. So early in our development of our project, I started writing a Substack called "Where's My Flying Car?" So you can look it up. We started getting a lot of traction on it. So the "Where's My Flying Car" was two parts to it, I guess. It's the Peter Thiel quip on kind of, we asked for flying cars, all we got was 120 characters. But also there was a book written by J. Storrs Hall called "Where's My Flying Car?" Great book, recommend it to anyone. And it's about this kind of idea of stagnation and, why haven't we got flying cars and why haven't we got like the rest of the stuff we were promised, in the 50s and 60s? What happened, what happened in 1974 and all that kind of stuff. So I started writing this Substack about air rights, about flying cars, about where are the drones, and it started to get traction. A lot of traction. We have about 16,000 subscribers, mainly from investors and real estate people. And through that, I started getting inbound inquiries from real estate people saying, hey, you're writing about air rights. You're writing about how valuable they can be. We know how valuable they are. I was like, okay, you should tell me, give me examples. And the real estate people started saying, in certain jurisdictions, you can actually purchase air rights above somebody's building and you can go and build it if they give you permission to do it. And you can actually gain from that if they don't want to build. So that's one use case. The other one is obviously things like putting cell towers on. That involves air rights as well. And then other jurisdictions, you can actually transfer the rights. So again, I know I've spoken about it, but it's kind of a high profile one, but I think it illustrates it, is St. Patrick's in Manhattan. They had air rights above it. They were never going to develop. Their church looks too good, but they need the money, right? So congregations are dwindling. They need the money, repair the roof. So they sold the air rights. So they sold the air rights for about 164 million. And the person who purchased them in this particular jurisdiction, New York, was able to transfer them to another block. And by transferring them, they were able to use those air rights to build up where their zoning had already maxed out. So they could have effectively built higher. So a little bit like Lego bricks. And that happens around in New York in certain jurisdictions. And again, New York has been kind of really interesting for us because when we talk to real estate developers there, they're like, yeah, we know air rights are valuable. Yeah. Give us a place to transact them. We'll do more of it. So that was what was coming in from us or to us from this Substack. And we started talking to the real estate guys and they were like, yes, if you can do this, if you can make it a marketplace that can actually transact as opposed to just put two parties together like a Zillow, can really transact, that is really valuable because it makes the market more liquid for us. And we can also then go out and look for air rights in jurisdictions that we feel will be valuable over time. So yeah, that was kind of the real estate side. So as we've kind of developed and gone on, we now view kind of the drone side of the business as important, but more like a call option for our project. And the real estate side is kind of like the solid piece of what we're doing. Transactions are also higher value, but also because you're dealing with people who understand their rights, there's less of a kind of a barrier. So when we talk to people in, let's say, suburban jurisdictions about air rights, they're first of all like, what are you talking about? So we're like, okay, we explain it. That's fine. If there are already drones in the area, we can point to the drones and explain air rights, and then it starts to kick in a little bit more. But for us, at the stage of what we are, we need to kind of push it forward to where kind of, if you like, fish where the fish are, as they say. And that's with the real estate guys. So that's kind of where our main focus is kind of currently. And that was kind of organic.
So I see or rather, you guys raised some capital recently, a pre-seed round co-led by Modular Capital and Portal Ventures, which is super exciting. Congrats on that. I see in the press release here, it seems like the value of the air rights market could be worth potentially $30 trillion on chain. Can we talk a bit about how you view the market, what it could be worth? Because again, it's just it's an area, well, having lived in New York City, I kind of understand and have heard about, buildings or property owners selling air rights to have other buildings get built up that are really massive in height and kind of exchanging them. But, that feels to me like a New York thing. How do you see this market kind of being a global phenomenon that's worth tens of trillions of dollars?
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, we raised around, we only really recently announced it. That was done a little while ago, but yeah, we announced it recently. So yeah, and Modular, just to say, Modular and Portal are being incredibly helpful with what we're doing, super supportive. So the size of the market. So the way we view this is if you take the US just as an initial market, yeah, you're right. New York is possibly the most valuable on the basis that air rights are trading for up to about $400 a square foot, which is huge, right? So that's really high. It equates to about 15 to 18% of the value of the land below it or the building below it, whichever way you want to look at it. So that's a huge amount when you factor in real estate globally. Now, not all jurisdictions are as valuable as New York, absolutely not. And not all jurisdictions are air rights necessarily owned by the individual. So the US being the US and the Constitution being very strong and it being an individualistic society means, yes, they do. And, don't come take it from me. So that's why we're quite happy to be in the US. But in other jurisdictions or in other locations in the US, air rights have transacted for anywhere from like $10 to $50 outside. So still, to us, significant, still value sitting above property that's untapped, right? So that has various uses. So yes, building into it. So you need various zoning or planning permissions to do that in certain areas, but zoning and planning changes. So those become more valuable. As drones actually do fly into them, there's a residual income there that becomes valuable. So people can then sell those off if they get drones in. Part of that for us is it also means that property owners welcome drones. So they're like, I want drones in because if drones are in my airspace is valuable. I can sell my airspace now. and I have done nothing with it. All I have to do is make sure that there's 10 drones overhead, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay because I'm making some capital contribution here. So in the US, that's the way we look at it. UK, we've layered onto that. So when you look at the UK, and London specifically, so if anyone knows London, it's kind of broken up into zones, but zones 1 and 2, kind of the most central. The air rights above that is worth about 52 billion sterling. So that was the last estimate done on that. And that was a pretty in-depth analysis, again, based off recent transactions, based off unused air rights, also above public structures. So, for example, Cannon Street Station is an example, if you know London at all. So Cannon Street Station was a railway station, and they built nice fancy offices above it. That was an air rights deal. And a lot of what's been happening in the UK now at the moment as well with change of government is planning is starting to get a little bit looser. And one of the big things is air rights. So people are now able to build higher in certain jurisdictions without getting like heavy permissions. So that's kind of how we factored in the size of it. There's also Australia, Canada, we've layered on it. India as well, but India is quite tricky in terms of getting databases and so on, but it's available if we wanted. But yeah, so that's kind of the size of the global market. Singapore as well. But when you come to Europe, less so, right? So if we wanted to do Europe, we have to do a deal directly with the government of that particular company or country. That's not to say we can't, but for us, that seems like a pretty long sales cycle, and also, seems quite difficult. In the US as well, because state by state, because of the nature of the US, state by state, they make different decisions. And also there's quite a few states who are actually looking at low altitude economies as being a real booster for them. So that's a real benefit. We don't have to wait for 10,000 people to make a decision. We only have to wait for maybe 100 in those states, which is a difference. But at the same time, we then have the individual who owns the air rights being able to transact. So yeah, that's kind of how we've come to those figures. It's really through a deep dive into that. ARK Invest also did a big piece on drones. So they value the drone economy at 450 billion. Now, we don't value our take of that at anything close to that. But when you factor it down, it's certainly a significant chunk of the market. At the end of the day, if people don't have permission to fly their drones, they have no business. So we give them the legal certainty, if you like, to be in that airspace.
I get the drone part for sure. That seems to be completely value add. People can make money suddenly from allowing drones to fly above their house. I think the pushback that I would maybe suggest is when you're talking about that there is this value and you can build on top of these houses within, for example, Zone 1 and Zone 2 in London. I mean, in my view, that value is already baked into the property prices of those particular assets. If you, in London, it's called freehold. If you own the entire building, you then have that right to either extend outwards or go up if you can get the planning permission. So it seems to me that if you separate it out and you sell the air rights, what's going to be left over is a building which you have to sell without the air rights, if you like. And that would therefore take presumably a hit on the price. So it seems to me that we're splitting it out, and maybe it's going to be more efficient at finding a price, and the aggregate is going to be more than the individual properties are worth now. But it seems to be that maybe we're just carving out value which is already baked in to those, for example, Zone 1 and Zone 2 properties.
Yeah, I suppose it's a fair question. I suppose the counter to that is, and it's happening right now in Zone 1 and 2, that people are selling their air rights, but holding their freehold. So there is money left on the table. So yes, if it was baked in, they'd sell it for nothing. But the fact they're selling it for something means it's on the table. So it's not baked in. So I suppose that would be my counter. There would be no market if it was all baked in. There would be no one would buy and sell air rights at all currently, which they do. So yeah, that would be kind of my counter. And recently, actually, transactions have happened in the UK. So the original value of the freeholding and the value of the freehold hasn't changed. That's gone up. As the freehold goes up, they just hold on to it. It goes up market prices, and they've severed the air rights and sold them separately. So yeah, it's already kind of happened. And yeah.
And can you just clear it in my head? But if you then sold a house where the air rights had been sold, does that mean a third party has the ability to build on top of the house that you are buying?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
So not necessarily. So there's a couple of deals that have been done recently in the UK where somebody has sold their air rights, and they've given basically with that air rights, they've said they will approve planning if planning comes through for whoever purchases. Other people have not done that and said you can just purchase it without the planning and you go at risk, and we may or may not approve it. So there's kind of different levels of air rights that get sold. So for example, the ones in Manhattan are sold, or the ones above St. Patrick's were sold with the development rights. So that was the value of them. But they could be purchased without the development rights, and you could take a view on it as to whether you get development rights into it. And again, you don't have to build, right? So air rights can be used for views as well. So this happens quite a bit. People would purchase the air rights to protect a view of a lake or to protect a view of a nice monument. You can purchase the air rights to prevent people building. And you can also just purchase them to hold as assets. So you could just purchase them the same way you might purchase a greenfield site, and you can just sit on it. And that will go up or down depending on the market forces. So that's also happening as well. In fact, in certain jurisdictions, not only New York, Chicago as well, people have purchased air rights just to bank them, just in anticipation that they will go up and they will be valuable for various different people. So, yeah.
So on your Twitter, I see some mentions of the SkyTrade radar app, which helps users stay informed of drone activities in their vicinity with alerts. I'm just wondering, based on some initial, I guess, data, what kind of activity levels do you see for someone that has their airspace on SkyTrade, and perhaps, what kinds of revenue flows would that person potentially see, and how do you see that scaling if drone activity like 10x's or what have you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the radar app that we launched, I think we have it on Play Store now. Yeah, we do. So basically the point of that is kind of using crypto incentives, effectively a Depin network to gather the drone data. So with that, and you can download it to Android devices. So we intercept drone signals with that, or the user, should I say, intercepts those drone signals. Those drone signals contain metadata, which has GPS coordinates, and we can trace back to the owner. In fact, we can even find out who the pilot is. Often these pilots are 1 to 100 or whatever it may be, depending on their license. So that we gather through incentivizing people to gather this data, and we then cross-reference it with the air rights. And in that way, we can say where the drone has been and make sure that the drone is adequately paying the right airspace owner. So it depends on the modeling of what we've done as to what a homeowner can earn. And it's kind of tricky, and I'll kind of explain. This is not to kind of get around it, and I do have a number, but based on the growth of drones, changes it quite a lot. So for example, if you look at, let's say there's a little place called Murphy in Texas that has a Walmart that does drone delivery. They only have one Walmart. So there's only one place doing drone delivery. So they fire out and they come back, and they fire out and they come back. And that's fine. But there are other ones going to open. So there are other places where drones will fly and they will cross over. So at the moment, the drones crossover houses quite a lot near where the drones fly from. And those ones, based on our calculation, can earn up to $2,500 to $3,000 a year. So those particular ones, if you're like around a Walmart or around a particular like drone station, but that will change over time because other ones will open. You can't just have one supplier of drones delivering just Walmart goods. So that's kind of the, if you like, the passive income, I guess, that those people would look to get. But again, it really depends. So if you're on the outskirts of town, probably less. If you're right beside a drone delivery place, probably more. But again, that's one of the reasons why we're pro-drone. We want people to kind of welcome the drones in. We want to say, yes, use our airspace. And there'll be people who say don't. So in doing that, you kind of narrow the market to make sure like these ones are saying yes, and you can go through there. And those ones are saying, no, you don't want to go through there. And that will kind of balance the market out. So yeah, those are kind of the figures we're looking at the moment for that side of the market, the drone side.
It is interesting because I'd seen on your Twitter that you had reference to real world assets and then also Depin. And I couldn't quite work out how the Depin pace came in. So it is basically like almost two separate crypto projects, if you like.
Yeah, I suppose we see it that the air rights are an asset. So they're going in, and if you like, the Depin and crypto incentives are used to build the network. And I suppose that's how we look at it. That they are connected for sure. Without one, you kind of don't have the other. Could you do without the crypto and Depin incentives? It would be quite difficult to do. It would be quite difficult. Coordinating a lot of people in a marketplace without Depin incentives and without bootstrapping it that way, I know certainly from my past, is not only hard, that's fine, it's incredibly expensive. And also the people building the network are the ones who usually end up with the least of it. So using the kind of Depin and crypto incentives helps that. So we section off an amount of token. It's not launched yet, but we section that off for the community to build it. And we've seen really positive interactions from people in these small places that are doing drone delivery. Also, one of the interesting things is a lot of these areas, the housing around Walmarts isn't necessarily it's not like your Manhattan housing, right? So it's not like $1 million housing. So passive income is helpful. And that's what we found by talking to the people in these areas. They are actually, happy about it. They're like, well, if the drones are going to fly, I may as well get something for it. And if I can help build the network and get something for that, great, we'll do that too. So we're kind of having quite a lot of positive reaction to that side of it.
So it sounds like the value at stake here is high. Help us understand what is the current way one can transact air rights, and how does kind of putting this on chain, so to speak, improve outcomes for the person selling air rights and perhaps improve outcomes for those looking to purchase these air rights. Let's maybe do a comparison between the old way of things and where you see things going.
Sure. Good question. So kind of the current way, if I want to buy air rights now, let's say I decided for some reason I want to buy some air rights in New York, I would have to find somebody who can help me do that. So there are specialist brokers who know some specialist real estate people who know there might be some deals happening. And we're actually talking to brokers in New York who are very excited about what we're doing, because access to those pools of people is hard. It's difficult. A lot of the time it's quite gated, very opaque. And what it means is that there's there's a small amount of large players who are able to do these deals, generally speaking. And that's the way it happens at the moment. So there's a lot of middlemen, there's a lot of brokers, a lot of lawyers, a lot of notaries, all that kind of stuff. That's the way it happens. So there's nowhere you can go in kind of Web 2 world, click on a button and find out what air rights you can buy. It's just not there. So our kind of contention is putting it on chain kind of leapfrogs that. We don't need to go through that pattern. We can do the cellular network in the Caribbean, right? We don't need the landlines. We can just jump straight on chain. And the reason to do that and put it on chain is purely from a business case. So we were looking at this very early days, and we weren't saying, okay, we have to build something on chain. What's it going to be? We were like, okay, this is what we're building, and on chain makes sense because it's mutable. The costs are lower. It's very transparent as to what we're doing. And we can see everything along the chain, which is really beneficial to us. That's kind of, if you like, the kind of current state and why we've moved that way. In terms of what it offers people in the marketplace as we build it, well, it's kind of interesting. So when you look at some of the real estate deals, or the air rights deals, should I say, it's our contention that the clearing price is below what it should be because the market is tight. It's not liquid enough to actually find the real clearing price. And while people are selling air rights, and let's say St. Patrick's selling for 164 million, they're delighted. We think that's too low. And we actually think is more valuable than that. And the reason we think that is because the apartments that have been built for air rights transactions of that nature have then sold for 15x what the original price was. So there's a huge amount, and that's fine. The developer's done a good deal, and that's fine. We shouldn't, but we contend that there is a clearing price that should be higher. But not only will that benefit the particular person who's selling the air rights, developers also own air rights. So it'll raise the market. So the whole market will move up, and that's actually a good thing. That's how we see the market playing out. Rather than it, one side benefiting over the other, everyone will benefit because there's a more liquid place to transact air rights. And also the air rights that are going to come into the marketplace are interesting. So we've talked to people who have small little bits of air rights around the place, particularly around cities, who are saying, well, we didn't do anything with it. No, we didn't think anyone would want to buy it. But okay, so if we can sell that, and if there can be a small development, we make something out of it. And you can actually put the parcels together as well. But it's very hard to do that if you don't have a working market. You have to make a lot of phone calls and find a lot of people. That's kind of how we see this kind of playing out.
How homogeneous versus heterogeneous are these products, do you think? Because I think in crypto, generally the best marketplaces tend to be when the products are pretty similar. So firstly, are you using NFTs or are you using tokens? Do you see it being an issue in terms of the different regulations between potentially different cities and things like this, just to sort of make it more confusing for the potential buyer?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That is definitely a point. So yeah, there are different air rights have different values and have different uses depending on what they are. And depending on the city and depending on the zoning will have different uses. So we kind of bake that all in. So effectively what you'll see when we push it out, when we deploy it, is you'll be able to see, okay, this has zoning for X, this doesn't have zoning for Y, etc. So you can make a kind of a judgment call on it. And you can also see what comparable prices have been. So yeah, I think that's the way kind of we're looking at it anyway. And certainly it's the way that when we talk to people who are in the air rights market, that's an important factor for them. Yeah, in terms of tokens, etc. Yeah. So what we do is once somebody registers with us, now there's kind of two ways that it happens. You can go to our website right now, if you've property, you can register right now and do it. And in the background, we then check that that property is yours. So we go into databases, we check, and we kind of cross-reference it. For larger real estate companies, obviously we take their database and we kind of do the same thing in a little bit more of a kind of automated way. And we confirm all that. And then we tokenize it. So we use a compressed NFT to do that on Solana. Who do we use? It's a Metaplex bubblegum standard. So we use that, and that actually works really well. In early days, when we were looking at what we were doing, we started using Immutable X, so like a ZK rollup equivalent. But it quickly kind of transpired the amount of tokenization we needed to do of the NFTs was so much that we needed to use something that was a little bit more efficient, quicker. And so, yeah, so that's why we started looking down the Solana route. And in fact, Solana have been incredibly helpful with us. So they've been, really helpful early days, getting us on the Solana network. So we've been really happy there. So yeah, that's kind of how we do the tokenization at the moment. We don't have a native token right now. We do have one planned, but it's not right now. We're still figuring out a couple of bits and pieces.
And previously you didn't come from crypto. As you said, you were Ryanair and various other companies. What's been your take so far? Because I believe it was your co-founder that's sort of introduced you to the world of crypto. I mean, Depin, presumably that's been a new concept as well. So yeah, what's been your view of crypto so far?
Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting. So early days when I started looking at this, I also got involved with kind of the network state movement a little bit, if you know those guys. So and got talking to Prospera, which is a special economic zone in Honduras. And that coupled with with our work with the think tank, the Mercatus think tank, we got kind of connected into Prospera. And they were looking at air rights and looking at how they could help develop a kind of a special economic zone. And with that, I was introduced then to Vitalik, who did a pop-up city in Montenegro. So he did that, I think was it 2 years ago now? I can't remember. Anyway, so I got invited down to that with the network state guys and a bunch of crypto people there. So I started kind of talking about what I was doing and, what was happening. And not every single one of them, most of them were like, okay, you need to think bigger about this. You need to just think bigger about this. It's a good idea. Crypto, great. And the encouragement from that community was just so much that I was like, okay, this is like, we're definitely, I think, onto something here. My co-founder, you're right. He's been on blockchain for 15 years. He always wanted this through smart contracts. But that to me showed me that there was a kind of a community around crypto that was also eager for things that I think can show a real world application. That's my view on it. And everyone pretty much that I've been introduced to in the crypto world has been fantastic, really positive. Don't get me wrong, we get a few bots here and there, and we get people trying to scam us here and there, but who doesn't in any kind of walk of life? That's just natural. I don't think that's unique to crypto. So yeah, I've been really encouraged by it. I think, again, crypto to me, the idea of permissionless money, I really like. I really like the way it kind of brings people into this space that have different ideas and different views on how the world should work. I think that's really good and refreshing. I think while what we do, yes, there's an asset behind it. I really believe what we're doing is helping people who have air rights who don't know they have value there, unlock them, which to me is really a benefit to society generally. And that's not to be kind of too lofty about it, but I do think that's a real benefit. And I think there's a lot of people within crypto who have similar views on that. So yeah, I've been delighted to be in it. So yeah, I mean, I don't hold myself as any sort of crypto genius. My co-founder is totally technical and knows knows everything about it. But yeah, I like the community and I kind of interact with them a lot now.
What's been that journey? What's that journey been like for you, having worked at much larger companies that have been growing really fast versus you starting something from the ground up? Obviously, very different path there you're taking, right, with a smaller team, tackling a new market. How's that experience been so far? Has there been any kind of key insights, learnings?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So kind of my background before the ones you mentioned, I've kind of been entrepreneurial since I was like small, doing various things. I even had like restaurants at some one point and coffee shops and yes, and like property stuff, like bits and pieces. I've always been quite entrepreneurial. I haven't been very good with authority, generally speaking. I think that's probably why I'm a founder. But in those organizations that I was in, yeah, you're right. They were bigger, faster growing, but generally there was a level of autonomy that was kind of given on the basis that they were growing so fast, so that you kind of, that kind of like over your shoulder couldn't be as much. So, you were given autonomy and being able to kind of run. And if you make mistakes, kind of fix them fast and kind of just run at it, get stuff done. So for me, I think, again, kind of to mention my co-founder, Marston. So we met at Y Combinator Startup School. We were working on 2 different projects. And having a co-founder, I think has been integral. So the other businesses and bits and pieces I did was just me. But having a co-founder, particularly one who's technical, has been a huge benefit. Not only just for the technical aspect, but for the kind of the bouncing things off each other, that kind of, level set. I think that has been incredibly important to me. And I've seen like the real value behind that. I think, because we're a small team, it's hard when you're small trying to get like the right people in, right? Because people who are very good, let's say amazing developers, a lot of them want to go work for the big money somewhere else, right? So you kind of really need to kind of impart what you're doing, the vision of what you're doing over and above, like just the day-to-day technical. And yes, you'll get a big salary because, we can't compete on salary, but we think we can compete on what we're doing. We think what we're doing is really interesting. And that's something that I've kind of, over time kind of figured out that is more of a value add to certain people than others. And therefore it's kind of self-selecting. So if we're interviewing people who are developers and they kind of gravitate towards some narrative on something else they've done, they're likely to be the ones that kind of get a magnet to us if the previous projects have been like really interesting, kind of slightly different. Whereas the other ones who are technical and are really good, they kind of tend to self-select and go elsewhere anyway. So I think that's been one of my learnings, is like just to kind of communicate the narrative of what we're doing and the vision really clearly to people who are looking at us as a potential place to work. So yeah, that's, I guess, my currently my biggest learning. Sure, there'll be a bunch more happening though.
Yeah. And how big is the team right now? And what is, I guess, the key use of, well, I guess you mentioned you did the fundraiser a while ago, but what are you focusing on next as far as the team composition?
Yeah, so we have, we're including myself and my co-founder, I think we're about 11 at the moment. So we kind of have it in kind of smaller groups. So we have the Solana guys who are busy doing Solana development. We have a web app and we have a regular app. So that's kind of how we split it, and QA across it and UI and UX across it. So yeah, that's kind of the way we split it at the moment. In terms of kind of key priorities, yeah, I mean, we did our raise back in March, April. We're talking to VCs again now for our seed. So yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of that. But the next one is really our go-to-market. So we have what we call if you go onto our platform now, you can register air rights, but you can also rent them. So you can rent them for like 30 minutes for like a couple of bucks. Now that's not a huge amount of use to you, but it shows you how it works. And then we make those contiguous for the drone. So it's kind of like the stepping stone towards it. The next one is what we call the auction house, which is kind of as it says on the tin. So if you have property, you'll be able to set an auction. If you have air rights, you'll be able to set the auction for the air rights. And also if you want to purchase or make an offer on air rights, if you don't own any air rights, you can do an uninvited bid on any of these air rights properties. So that's what we're doing as well. So that'll be deployed reasonably soon. We're just kind of finishing out some testing stuff on that. But yeah, that's kind of our next kind of big milestone, if you like. We also set up a wait list for that, which is really big. I mean, actually surprisingly so. I mostly from crypto community. So I think we've over 9,000 people signed up there in the last couple of weeks to trade, which is great. And then, we're continuing to talk to real estate people. So large real estate companies we're chatting to, smaller ones as well. But that's that's my main focus is kind of the fundraising. The guys get the auction house out, and continue talking to real estate guys because, real estate industry is, it's very personable, right? So it's not just something that you can kind of set up, you can write a script for and, you'll onboard a bunch of people. It is like face to face. It is like, talking to people so they understand what you're trying to do. And people with air rights, they're valuable in certain, in circumstances. So they don't want to just kind of throw it up online and kind of cross their fingers. They want to understand what's happening. So that's a big focus of mine.
And I imagine it's been it's an unusual project for sure. So I'd be interested, what was the feedback from VCs? And then likewise, I come from the property industry and I know how traditional it is and how slow they've been relative to other industries to adopt tech. So what's been the response from both parties?
Yeah, it's interesting. So what I would term traditional VCs, so non-crypto VCs, have been slower to kind of come around to what we're trying to do. Crypto VCs that we've been talking to, some have been, really positive about what we're doing and what we're trying to do. Obviously, Portal and Modular came in and some really, really good angels came in with us as well, that see this kind of unlock of a market that's not really visible at the moment, is quite opaque. And I think that was the element with talking to the VCs that was interesting for them to kind of understand that air rights is potentially an asset. And also, a lot of people don't understand air rights, that they are valuable, or what are they? I mean, I'm in it every day. So, to me, it's like, but, I talk to people who are like, I don't even know what it is. And I think there was an element of that when I was talking early days to VCs as well. They just didn't quite understand that these are valuable. And that's why it was so important when the real estate people started to come in and started to approach us. It was like, this was like a real validation point that real estate people who own the air rights are saying they want to do something with the air rights. It's like, okay, that means something. To your point of kind of the slow nature of property, I mean, I think, it is slower than other industries for sure. But there's been a marked difference. I noticed when talking to people from the US in real estate and people, let's say, from the UK in real estate, US is much quicker. They're much more interested in how they can actually increase capital values. And one of the ways to increase the capital value of your real estate is to make your air rights worthwhile. And in doing so, you increase that. And with commercial property, and this is again what the real estate people are saying to me, with the kind of, if you like, the drop off in the values of commercial property in certain locations, they need to do something to try and increase it and move it back up. So this is actually beneficial to them. So, and that's not to say all real estate people, some real estate people have told me very, straight, we're really conservative. We're going to wait till this market is much bigger. But then a lot of them are saying, no, we understand tokenization is happening. We can see it happening with the likes of BlackRock, KKR are doing stuff. We understand that this is the way it's going and we want to be part of it. So it's a mix, but in general, the kind of the way things are moving, we've had very positive responses, particularly in regards to the tokenization side of it. And the fact that you can transact, that was one of the big things. It's like, okay, I can transact. You're not just giving me a window shopping here.
Maybe a slightly odd one. You might have no reasonable response, but you worked at Ryanair, you talk about drones, and your blog talks about flying cars. So I was wondering if you had any insights on the future of air travel and, when we can start having flying cars.
I mean, I do. I read a lot about kind of flying cars or eVTOLs, as they call them, or air taxis, whatever anyone wants to call them. I'm kind of fascinated by it insofar as like, I really want one. Like, I really like one. I think they could be cool. And I'm really kind of don't understand fully why we don't have them. So, I mean, there's a couple of players out there doing kind of what they call electronic vertical takeoff and landing, or whatever term you want to give them. I mean, to me, there are, and this is just researching it, and I'm sure people will contradict me, but a lot of the ones out there are battery powered, and I think they're not really long-term going to work. Batteries in general, despite what people may say is old technology. It doesn't work very well. They're very heavy. To get something off the ground that you need that lift for, you need a lot of power, like a lot. And that's why aviation fuel is so good, because aviation fuel is actually very efficient. Like, it's very efficient. So to replace it is hard, and it's hard with a battery. It's very hard with a battery. Hydrogen, I think, is definitely one way, but you've potential problems with hydrogen. It can be a little tricky. But if they can tie that down, that would be good. There's also propulsion ones that are interesting. So I've seen these ones that are propulsion as opposed to battery, and I think they could actually be very useful. So, I mean, you see test flights. There's been test flights in New York of air taxis. They tried to do, I think they did a couple in Paris. It didn't, it was kind of smaller scale than at the Olympics than they wanted. There are a bunch of these trying to do it. I mean, my contention is that they're probably looking at it slightly the wrong way. A lot of them seem to be trying to replace helicopters. And helicopters, the routes helicopters take aren't really that particularly useful. I mean, so for example, if we go to New York again, so going to JFK, you still have to get to the helicopter, like, it's not that efficient. For these to work, I think they need to be intertown, like, they need to be town to town rather than like downtown to airport. I think the concentration of these things around airports is the wrong way to look. And I think there's a natural reason why people are looking at that who are building these, is because most of them have received funding from the traditional airline company. So, and airlines generally, bar their business models, the airlines themselves generally haven't innovated in kind of anything like they're not orders of magnitude better than they were 50 years ago. They've been optimized, sure, but not orders of magnitude. So they're not particularly innovative, would be my contention on that. So when you get a bunch of group of people who aren't particularly innovative, trying to do something innovative, will it work? It's the idea, to me, it's very hard to get group consensus on a contrarian kind of project. And I think that's what air taxis or flying cars can be. And I think if you do them town to town, now maybe you connect them into the transportation systems, I think that would be good. But just into airports, I think it's going to be a long way off. Drones are different. So one of the big things with flying cars that you see is because they have people. It's like airlines, right? So the biggest thing in an airline is safety. Always safety. If someone says safety, everything else falls away. And the same is true of flying cars. So if there's any safety issue, it just doesn't happen. So the bar to getting these in the air and actually paying people in them is very, 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 very high. And that's why drones I see as a stepping stone in. So if people become more comfortable with drones being in the sky, cargo drones, they can see stuff happening. It's actually reducing costs. Then I think people start to realize that this is maybe an ecosystem that is helpful to them. I think going straight into flying cars is hard for people to comprehend. That's my view on it, certainly from my research. But again, there's people out there who are building these things who would be kind of probably better equipped than me, but that's judging on what I've dug around on. And the players who kind of launched, I haven't seen any major successes. There are a couple of companies out in Dubai who are doing stuff, and it's kind of interesting out there because the regulation can be, what's the word? Well, it's just like, it's easier, I guess. Somebody can just say, yes, you can fly your air taxis across the desert for 2 months and test them out. You can't really get that in kind of central Ohio or whatever. It doesn't really happen. Some departments of transports are doing sandboxes, which is really quite cool. So in the US, there are some, but they're not as kind of open as the Middle East yet. But they will be, I think. Yeah, I think we're a ways off on the flying cars, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems like the mechanism of power delivery is going to be the biggest determinant, whether it's batteries or something else. Something has to get like 10 or 100x more efficient there for it to be feasible, I think. The drone the drone stuff is just interesting too. I think a lot of it also just has to do with the fact that, at least in the US, you have to factor in weather. You mentioned it before, but not everyone has a yard, right, in cities. And so then if you wanted to deliver to an apartment building, then there has to be all this other infrastructure that has to get built out to like create a central point. And so you start checking off cities, and they have restrictions on air rights with, security reasons. Airports are around a lot of cities. And so it becomes a very small, that funnel gets a lot smaller in terms of feasibility of drones in the US. But I think this is all solvable stuff. It just has kind of explained why it's taken so long to see any traction here. I mean, I was looking at this stuff in 2016, 8 years ago, thinking for sure within 5 years we would get Amazon Prime deliveries by drone, and maybe like a few cities in the US have that. But
yeah, they do. Yeah, so I
there.
think at the moment it's about 30. I think it might be slightly, but in around 30 Walmarts who are doing drone delivery in the US. There's a couple of other places doing it, like restaurants and stuff in kind of smaller towns that are testing them out. So yeah, it is definitely happening. It's happening without permission of the homeowners, which is a problem, but we're solving that. But definitely,
Right.
one of the things as well is that there was a change of the administrator in the FAA last year, I think was last year. And he previously was COO of Supernal, which is Hyundai's flying car company. So he's pretty, future facing. So he is awarding licenses for what they call beyond visual line of sight drones. So this is the idea of where, you can't really have a scale drone business when it's one drone to one person flying it. It's not going to work. So you have to have like multiple drones for one person flying or one person overseeing, really, because these things can be autonomous. So he's actually started to, not loosening it up is the wrong word, but he started to issue licenses for these more frequently. So it's definitely a movement that's moving from the top, which is great, And then on state levels, there's definitely specific states are looking at this in a really meaningful way. In fact, some have changed, put bills forward and had laws changed to enable this to kind of be freed up and happen. So yeah, there's definitely that. The one part that we see as being missing is the kind of the public part, right? So it's the public consent. But interestingly, all of the drone companies in all of the states want the public to be happy with what's happening. And our view, the best way they're going to be happy with it is if you give them a little bit of something back, right? Or at least you give them control over their airspace so that they can say, yes, I want a no-fly zone, or yes, happy to have the drones in Monday to Friday, no problem, as long as I get some sort of fee for it.
Awesome. Well, John, I mean, we covered a lot of topics today, learned a ton about this new asset class. Are there any kind of closing thoughts or things for us to look forward to?
Yeah, it's been great. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. The main thing we're looking at the moment is the launch of what we call the auction house. So if anyone's interested in becoming kind of an early user of that, an early trader, just sign up to the wait list. You just go to our sky.trade and you just go to trade airspace, and it'll give you can pop in your email, and we'll contact you when we have it up and ready to go. We have air rights already on the marketplace. So we have nearly 8,000 from real estate guys. We're holding off on putting any more in because we want to try and balance the supply and demand. We have more in the pipeline, but we're holding off. So yeah, we're kind of getting ready to get that kind of kicked off. And then, anyone who is involved in kind of deep in projects, interested in what we're doing, please reach out. I'm always happy to talk to people and to see what we're doing and what we're doing wrong and right. That's important to us. So yeah, but that's about it for me, I think. Oh, and sign up to my Substack. Where's my flying car?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we'll definitely include the links to your Substack and the SkyTrade links as well in the show notes. Thanks again, John. It's a super fun combo.
Thank you.